Yep.
All right, you can go ahead and hit live stream.
Okay, it's live.
All right, we're calling the Monona Grove School Board meeting. Time is 7:01. Has there been a declaration of public notice?
Yes, there has.
All right, order of business. Are there any public appearances? I believe there is. Brent Wessel?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
All right, so just go ahead and get started.
go ahead.
All right, I would like to thank the Monona Grove School Board and Superintendent for the opportunity to speak. I have 3 young school-age kids that live in the Monona Grove School District. The Monona Grove closed school in-person learning. My wife and I decided to temporarily put our first and second graders into private school. They have done well and have gone to school for full days, 5 days a week, all year with no disruptions. My family is very thankful that a private school weighed the risks that were not completely known at the time and decided that in-person school was worth it. I've always thought the job of teaching our kids is one of the most important essential tasks in our society. Department, grocery, and hardware stores found a way to operate, yet public schools, mostly in the metropolitan areas such as Monona Grove, shuttered. Rural and private schools did not. What's different about these schools? One of the biggest concerns I have going forward is the forcing of children to wear masks, especially given the recent changes that, due to CDC guidance, that DCPH has removed the mask mandate, and so have many businesses. Considering the offline communications I've had with some units meetings with more emphasis on Superintendent Olson, it would seem like the prevailing wisdom is that the mask will stay on for as long as the CDC says so. I do not support this position. I think it would be beneficial for Monona Grove to send out surveys to gauge parental opinions on continued masking. The CDC is not an infallible institution. The following is an excerpt from a Yahoo News story ran in May 26 titled, "Children Should Keep Masking Up," CDC Director said, even as some experts question the need. From the article, "There is still transmission associated with young children," Walensky said. That's the CDC director. "They have been vectors of transmission for older people. A number of scientists point to research, however, that contradicts Walensky's assertion. What Rochelle Walensky said this morning is incorrect," Dr. Monica Gotti, an infectious disease specialist at the University of California, San Francisco, told Yahoo News. "Children are not vectors." Gandhi wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post that describes the risk of child contracting coronavirus from an infected person at 0.0007%. Outdoors, Gandhi and her co-authors found that the risk was 1,000 times less than that, which is to say effectively non-existent. "We have sacrificed our children on an altar of fear," Dr. Gandhi told Yahoo News. In response to this query from Yahoo News about how Walensky had come to her conclusion that the child-related coronavirus risks, the CDC spokesman sent the agency's guidance on school-based transmission. Yahoo News forwarded this guidance for independent review. "This document definitely does not support Dr. Walensky's statement she made in Congress," says Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, a Stanford epidemiologist who reviewed the guidance forwarded by CDC at the request of Yahoo News. I remain mystified by her statement. End of article excerpt. "The CDC changes have spurred some schools in the state to drop mask mandates, even in large districts such as Waukesha. The private school my children go to is expected to announce masks optional in a couple of weeks. COVID cases are low, vaccinations are available for those who want them. 65 years and over, the group that is responsible for over 99% of the deaths in Dane County, are 96% vaccinated. Not one child 19 and younger has died due to COVID in Wisconsin. It is time to break the cycle of fear, stop treating our children as dangerous disease vectors, and take the masks off." To the parents that may be listening, this is why school choice programs are so important. School choice allows you to choose where your child can go to school. Sometimes it covers the entire cost of private schools' tuition. If you're having problems with Wisconsin public schools, please take a look at this program and support its expansion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from board members at all? All right, well, Brent, thank you again for sharing that. All right, next is the consent agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
I move the consent agenda, approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and second. Let's do a roll call vote. Susan Fox,
Aye.
Elizabeth Cook,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Susan Manning,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and Lorene. Ayes have it, motion carried. Next is recognitions.
Okay, we'll pull together our formal recognitions next meeting, for the month. But I would like to just informally tonight, as we wrap up the school year, just a heartfelt thank you to everyone involved that got us through this year, all of our staff, our parents, our children, and it's really truly been a collective team effort. And we go back and reflect on what has happened this year, and I'm extremely proud of the accomplishments that have occurred, and I just think it's appropriate at this point to just a big thank you to everyone involved, as well as all of you here tonight, as well our board. It's just we're ready to we're not, we know we're not done yet. We'll talk a little bit more later about where we're moving ahead with our schooling, but certainly a milestone to get to this last school day. So very much appreciate all the work everyone has done.
Whoops.
Susan Manning?
So are we in recognitions? Am I in the right place here?
Yes.
Our policy meeting went pretty far. So Dan, do you want to tell them about Gabe Karimi? So one of our graduates, football player Gabe Karimi, is going to be inducted into the UW Athletic Hall of Fame. He also went on from college to play for the Bears in Chicago, and then had kind of a career-ending injury, as I recall. But I mean, and then to go to graduation and get to sit with Torrin was just a wonderful experience. And if you go to Iowa City and you go to the right grocery store, his poster number 28 is still up on the walls. And it's just Torrin. We've had some wonderful kids and athletes. And again, as Susan Fox always says to me, how can you just mention a few when there's so many? And again, the families who have lost people to COVID, and our hearts are with you. And the families of, in particular, Monona Grove graduates who are caring daily, day in and day out, for COVID patients. And then going home to their families and their children. Thank each and every one of you, and all of our teachers who came back in person with all of our students. I'm sorry, I'm just a little choked up about all this. And the graduation was wonderful.
Agreed, Susan Manning. Thank you. All right. Elizabeth?
I just wanted to loop back on Dan, your recognition of, all the folks that were involved in making this year happen. And I just want to make sure you were included in that recognition as well. It has been quite a year with a lot of different moving pieces and parts. And so, thank you too for all the work and long nights that you've put into making this year happen. And I agree, getting to the end of it feels like a huge, important milestone.
I think we all concur with Elizabeth. All right. Moving on to correspondence and announcements. Susan, did you have something?
I just a couple announcements. There was a WPEN meeting yesterday or the day before, and there are a couple things coming up. One, they have a summit every summer, and is there anybody who doesn't get their emails? Because it's never clear to me. I'll forward it. They have a summit every year that's excellent on public education. It's not just for board members, it's for community members, teachers, anybody interested in supporting public schools. And this year there's an Equity in Action Leadership Circle connected with that. Instead of doing a book study like they did last year, they're doing a different topic. It runs for 6 weeks and you can jump in and out of it and just go to one, but starting June 17th and then it runs through August 5th. The summit is August 2nd. Registration is open now for that. A couple things coming up also on June 15. There's a national group called Fulfill the Promise about special education and requesting that the federal government as well as state governments fulfill their promise to actually fund special education IDA funding. And also 504 funding, which there is no funding for that right now, and that's another area. So they're doing some kind of event at 11 o'clock at the Capitol for anybody who's interested. You can find all this online. I'll forward all this to you too, but I just wanted to make this announcement public as well in case somebody else is interested. June 21st, the WPN is planning some kind of action at the Capitol in response to the Joint Finance Committee decision on the budget. And we'll be talking more about that later tonight when we get to preliminary budgets. But that's an important event also. And it's very important that people weigh in because this is, we're in a really serious situation financially, statewide. And it'd be a good thing for not just board members, but community members, teachers, everybody to contact their legislators. It's not a formal legislator report. I just want to throw these dates out and events so you're aware of them.
Thank you, Susan. Susan Manning?
I would reiterate what Susan said about the WIPON meeting. It was absolutely excellent, and they covered so many different legislative issues. So it's really nice to have Susan kind of cover that for us because it's really hard to get it organized in your mind. So it's really nice to have that piece. The other thing that was really interesting is the city of Monona is working on a resolution for LGBT, and they have reached out to, I think to you, Lorraine, and I've kind of sent them to Susan Fox because they want to draft a resolution very similar, and at least one council person does, similar to ours, because they were impressed with the work that we did. So I thought that was really nice. And WSB had an excellent program yesterday on superintendent evaluations by Dan Nerad. And then one of the best programs I've seen in a long time. Elizabeth, do you want to give the title? And so the part of the part I enjoyed the most was the panel on which our board member, Elizabeth Cook, presented. They had 5 minutes to present an hour worth of work, and they just did an excellent job, and I learned so much. Thank you very much. And again, encouraging board members to check into some of these workshops. They're just superb.
Thank you, Susan. If anyone's interested, it's the Mental Health America's Policy Summit was yesterday. It's available online.
Absolutely excellent.
Excellent. Thank you both. Right. Are there any other correspondence and announcements? All right, moving on to administrative reports.
Okay, so as again we know, today was our last day for our students. Our teachers are in all day tomorrow, wrapping up things, and Friday morning as needed. And then we have a short break, and then we begin summer school on June 21st. And so what has happened, since the last time we met, as far as planning and with regard to our operating plan and so on. So there will be another update to our operating plan next week. The biggest change that will be the next step is that we are going to be able to make some adjustments to our quarantining procedures. And as you may recall, for most of or all of this year, that when we've had positive cases, that we've required mandatory 14-day quarantining. Now the new guidance is that if individuals are masked, that we can still allow students in school and not need to quarantine out of school for those 14 days. And that's huge. I mean, that's one of the things that we were very fortunate that we had very few students and staff in quarantine this year, but that was as much as we worked so hard to try to get students back in school, and then to have to be out for a couple of weeks at a time again, was a real challenge for those students and their families. So that's certainly a positive update, and I do expect again throughout the summer to continue to monitor and hopefully continue to have additional positive changes like that. So what I wanted to share with you tonight is, as far as the decision making, as we all know, and I appreciate the comments of Mr. Wessel earlier, as well, that As you know, we've been under orders most of this school year. And so when it came to mitigation strategies, we didn't have a lot of decision making. It was pretty much made for us. Now we have recommendations and guidance, which does give us a little bit of leeway to make decisions about, how strictly we follow, certain recommendations and so on. Without question, CDC is our primary, source. But then how that trickles down to us as a local school district, there is some other additional factors to consider. So as I think you're well aware, throughout this entire year, we've been meeting on a regular basis, more than once a week, really, with folks from Public Health, Madison, and Dane County. For the last 2 months, we've also had 2 medical experts join our weekly meetings, Dr. Sabrina Butteris and Dr. Greg Demuri with the UW Pediatrics and Public Health, and they've been really helpful to be part of our meetings to help us understand the CDC guidance and localize it here in Dane County. And so they're going to continue to join us, throughout the summer and extended time through this. And again, that they've been extremely helpful. And again, we're going to have to continue to make, do some decision making. So I put a little bit of information for you as far as their background, and that news release that I shared with you is a little bit dated. The information's not, but it was put out about a month ago. But again, the current guidance is still that for students who have not had an opportunity to be vaccinated, which we know at this point 12 and under is still not available, that it is strongly recommended to continue masking. I think the challenge is going to be as we get through the summer and our 12 to 18-year-olds get vaccinated, what will that look like for the fall? We certainly hope that means that we can relax, some of the masking requirements, and those are the discussions and decisions that we'll have to make over the summer. So I would expect that for the fall, by early to mid-August is where we'll have that decision point about what is the guidance at that time, what do things look like, and we'll certainly, every board meeting, we'll keep this on the agenda for discussion and so that we can keep everyone up to date on that. So like I said, I feel the other thing I should say, we will also relax our guidance for our staff for the summer when they're not in the presence of students. We'll follow this current guidance, which is, again, if staff have been vaccinated, that they no longer have to wear masks. And so, again, the challenge is how we deal with that with the student population. So like I said, next week we'll update that plan and we'll make sure we share it out at that time.
Eric?
Thanks for the update, Dan. Just a couple of quick questions. Has there been any information regarding the Wisconsin immunization law, and if that will apply to our students as all the other, within the realm of COVID-19 and the vaccine?
Yeah, and Krista, if you have an opportunity to chime in, if you haven't had a chance to talk to her recently on this, but so my understanding is that at this point, I'm not hearing anything that there'll be any kind of requirements or required vaccines. I think one of the interesting things, though, to help us make our decision about, since again, we're not requiring families as well to report whether or not their students have been vaccinated, but my understanding is that Wisconsin Immunization Registry will record that data. Part of it is the timeline about it's a lot to gather and have that up to date, but that might very well help us in our decision making as well. So, Krista, I don't know if there's any more to add to that.
I think you covered it. That's about what I know today.
Yeah. Krista, you're breaking up a little bit. So that law is already written. It's already in place. So it's nothing new.
We have that information to help guide us with our overall.
Moving really slow, Krista.
Right. Nothing. Right.
Krista, you were kind of broken up.
You were breaking up. Dan, I got another quick question.
Sure.
So plan is.
Go ahead. I didn't add anything new.
Plan is we're going to be in person next year. That's been determined. The only question is, what will the precautions look like, and will masks be included? To
Exactly.
Just kind of summarize what you're saying.
Thank you. Yeah. And I should also add, Just to remind everyone, we will have a report at the next board meeting as far as virtual learning option for students. We are in the process of surveying families right now. That's due by the end of the week. We expect a very small number of families that are going to choose the virtual option. So we'll be looking at kind of individualized plans for students. But like I said, we'll report out that at the next meeting as well, what that looks like and what the numbers are for that. But otherwise, to make it clear, we absolutely 5 days a week, full regular schedules.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Lorraine. So Dan, I think one of the themes that we hear around concerns with masking the students is just around like the impact on the students. So do we know the extent to which masks were disruptive in the learning environment this year?
I would say just anecdotally, from the feedback, I think it, and we're all in that situation, right? And so I don't know, I'd be careful not to make a blanket statement
Sure.
and say, well, there was no impact. Of course, it's a challenge, right, with that. But I would say I'm confident saying that it's minimal, and that our students have been fantastic, about really, I hate to use the word compliance, because students they are rule followers, and they've been really good about it, and so we also know that for it's very uncomfortable for some students, and so that kind of indirectly, of course, I guess could make things challenging. But all in all, I think it went really well.
Great, thank you.
Peter?
I just want to remind us to keep in mind what the point of this is. The death rate from COVID in Dane County was half the average in Wisconsin, and it was a quarter of the average in many of these rural areas where there was little or no masking, where kids went back to school full time and so on. So in our Cottage Grove, Monona Grove communities, that represents somewhere between 8 and 20 deaths of your neighbors and friends. So I just wanted to remind us what the purpose of the masks and where we are and what it has gotten us. And it is true that there haven't been any deaths in Dane County of students. I do know of at least one case where there's a student who had COVID who has long haul, as a long hauler to the point where it's still disabling, and almost a year after, more than a year after the student had had COVID. So we do want to keep in mind, what we've managed to do, and what the point and purpose of the safety precautions that we have adopted, and we will continue in some form for a while yet.
Thank you, Peter. All right, moving on to board reports. So policy committee meeting, Susan Manning. Oh, you're on mute, Susan.
Sorry. The policy committee met in May, and at that meeting, there was a public appearance by a parent who brought interest items to us on board policy 5460, graduation requirements, and 9250, relations with parents and guardians. And the committee was very interested in that information, and plans to spend time having administration review what the current practices are and the procedures are, making sure we're all in alignment with the policies. So we will be working on that. There was also 0131.1 bylaws and policies. It was discussion only, and it clarifies that if a board member, and I think the superintendent has put that information out to the board as well, if you are making amendments to a policy, that needs to be in writing before the meeting. And then we have a group of technology policies that we've been waiting for quite a while on. They brought us the information now, and we just have not been able to get to them. And we're spending 2.5 hours in our meetings and probably a good 4 hours in prep. We had a really good board meeting, policy meeting today, And I want to thank Peter Sobel as a board member for attending. He presented comments to board policy 0144.5, the board code of conduct, which is a new policy. So it was helpful to have that input and to have those very specific documented items for discussion. We ended up spending the discussion with Peter as the board member present was very, very informative to us. And then we proceeded with our own discussion until after 5 o'clock. So we still have the technology policy and the equity policy to work on. So we have scheduled 2 more additional policy meetings. That committee is working very hard. And I want to thank both Susan and Elizabeth for the time that they spend on that and the insights and information that they bring. Do you want me to give the Foundation, Monona Grove Education Foundation report as well?
Yes.
Okay. The Monona Grove Education Foundation met on June 8th, 2020 at 4 p.m. Superintendent Dan Olson provided a report that included information on the Monona Grove High School and the MG21 graduations, all of which were wonderful experiences for those board members that were able to attend, particularly all 3. They were really wonderful experiences. He also indicated that access to the new school building may be accessible in July, and he is going to try and provide some kind of tour for the Monona Grove Education Foundation board after that accessibility is granted. There's an announcement of an additional Monona Grove Education Foundation scholarship recipient for 2021. It's the Newhouser Scholarship. It was awarded to Rojan Kopel Abiazani. The board approved a motion to include scholarship recipients in the community newspaper. And Patty Parrott provided an update on the annual fundraiser for 2021, which will be the golf ball drop again. It's planned to occur in the city of Monona Park this year, and the date is still to be determined. The funny part was people were saying, but we really want to make sure that you don't conflict with the Friends of the Senior Foundation dance scheduled for October 3rd and the Fall Festival scheduled for October 16th. And then they decided maybe they'd combine everything. So we're still waiting for a date on that. And their next meeting will be July 13th at 4 p.m.
Thank you, Susan. All right, moving on. There are no action items today, so we're moving on to discussion items. First is policy revisions, deletions, first reading.
Okay, this is very straightforward. This is just a correction as we were looking at our policies. Your policy 155 on committees, of course, is what you as a board decide as far as what committee makeups and so on. And we have a new employee relations committee that that states that should be composed up to 3 members. Well, in our policy 3340.01 that talks about general employee concerns, it references that committee and mistakenly says that that committee will be comprised of 2 board members. Now, that was the way it was like originally when it was put together. So it's just a matter of reconciling the policies, and the latest action the board had taken was with 155, where you just had decided up to 3 members. So so that's all that is, for tonight's first reading.
Okay. Moving on to 2021-2022 preliminary budget.
Right over to Jared.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Noreen. Attached to the board docs is a summary of the motion that was approved at Joint Finance Committee. So as we've talked about with the preliminary budget, and as we continue to plan for the 21-22, and as Susan Fox had stated in recognitions and announcements, we are definitely in a very unique position in a undesirable situation as it talks about K-12 funding. We, for a long time, have been underfunded as school districts, especially public education, and we continue to see that moving into the next budget. So what I provided there was just an overview of what is currently in place that will be eventually making its way to the full legislature. And then if that's passed, it will go to the governor's office for either an entire budget veto or line item vetoes. And as we know, at the last budget go arounds, there were some line items that vetoes that did allow the school district to receive some additional funding. However, as we continue to monitor the situation at the state capitol, it looks like some of those are some uphill battles for even the governor to be able to make some changes to the state budget if it's passed as is. Some of the biggest takeaways that I want to point out is right now there is a plan for $0 increase to K-12 per pupil as either per pupil aid or revenue limits. In addition to that, special education for the first year of the biennium is slated to be the same. And if we remember, the governor had recommended a 45% increase or a 45% reimbursements for special education, which would have given the Monona Grove School District an additional $1.2 million. So if we recall, this third Friday, this past fiscal year, the district lost 62 FTEs in membership. And our membership runs on a 3-year rolling average, which means that in order for Monona Grove School District to receive additional funding to go towards our inflation for health insurance, for staffing costs, for wage increases, the district would have to receive over 80 new students to even start to see some increases in revenue. That doesn't even stay in line with what inflation is aligned at. So when we anticipate a 2% increase in health insurance, some staffing changes to meet our class size goals and guidelines that are set by the board, what we've talked with our community about, and CPI of a 1.23 for just wages, we're still looking at close to $1 million deficit. I know that a lot of times you're hearing in the news that the school district could use the ESSER grants. Those are one-time funding, which will actually, if we did have to use those funds, which would actually create a larger cliff at the end of our budget, and if we're not going to see an increase in state funding. So as we continue to work through that at the next board meeting, the board will have to approve a preliminary budget. In the 11 years that I've been at Monona Grove School Districts, I will tell you this will be a very preliminary budget. We are continuing to plan for it. There's obviously state laws that the school district must continue to meet. So for example, majority of our budget, 75% of our budget goes to staffing. We're a school district, and as our previous board member, Dean Bowles would say, is we buy time. And there are state laws that require us to issue contracts by a certain time to our teachers, which is May 15th. They need to sign those by June 15th. But we won't even know what our true funding is going to look like. Our fiscal year starts on July 1st. We won't have final numbers for a budget till 4 to 5 months into it. And so as we continue to hear individuals talk about school districts need to run like a business, in many aspects, we do run like a business. We obviously are continuing to watch our expenditures, but as a business, there are raw materials that come in to build a house, to sell appliances, to sell material. If it doesn't meet a certain standard, those raw materials are turned away. We do not turn away our raw materials. Those are our students. We're here for our students. We accept every student. Some students might cost a little bit more to educate. Some might cost a little less, but we're here for each and every one of our students. And so as we continue to build our budget and monitor what our membership is going to look like, we continue to go up against a pretty large wall that's being built for us on school funding. And if we do not receive, that $200 per pupil, we are truly not even at that inflation rate to continue to keep up with it. We have a very supportive community. that renewed a operational referendum, which actually we increased by $1.1 million. And at that time, we were not necessarily anticipating this large of a loss of revenue from the states. And so I encourage you to continue to monitor and watch the news and what's happening at the state capitol. But right now we're anticipating that we might be looking at approximately $1 million deficit. And that's just with doing minimal increases, continuing to try to hire staff in a very small pool as we continue to see individuals leave the education fields, less individuals that go into the universities for education programs, and continuing to provide the most up-to-date education for our students that are coming in from all aspects within our community, and trying to walk them through a public education system that is going to prepare them for whatever future that might be when they graduate from high school. So as like I said, at the next board meeting, we will get an update. The board will have to approve a preliminary budget, and that preliminary budget is probably going to look like, unless we see some additional funds start flowing through Joint Finance Committee, potentially close to $1 million deficit, which means that we're going to have to look at some serious cuts, look at fund balance, look at some one-time funding opportunities that will just create that bigger budget cliff the following years to come.
Thank you, Jared. I wanted to ask, are there any suggestions that you have for community members, staff, or board members to place pressure on legislators? Do you have any suggestions of any things that we can do to support?
I definitely think it's very important that we continue to keep this front and center. We do have very supportive legislators that represent our school districts and our communities. However, we need to continue to reach out to friends and families across the states that might have legislators that are part of the majority party that can really put pressure when it comes to joint finance and the ability to pass some additional funding for education. I think the important part of it is that for so long, public schools have done a great job of making things work. However, there's a point in time where that's just not going to be able to happen. And unfortunately, then it becomes too late, and so that's why we want to continue to keep this. I would encourage you to continue to talk to your friends and family, contact individuals at the state capitol, and let them know that there's, at a minimum, we need to keep up with inflation for education.
Thank you. Susan Fox? You're mute, Susan.
I would reiterate the points Jared just made about, if you have relatives throughout the state, because we are fortunate that all of our legislators are supportive, but encouraging them also to do what they can do. I know Mark Buchanan has been involved at the national level. In fact, Wisconsin received a letter within 24 hours, I think. Part of the rationale for the Joint Finance Committee and not extending any aid at all and not increasing the revenue limit was this one-time federal money we were going to get. However, I don't know if some of them didn't realize. I think I heard one of them, I listened to part of that hearing, say, well, there's a requirement with that's very common with federal money called maintenance of effort, where if you don't, the object of that money was not to supplant state money, it was to supplement, to add to state money because of COVID and all the extra expenses we've had. And that's true of these last two federal pots of money. So basically, by their decision to give us no increase and no revenue increase, they have put the very receipt of that federal money in jeopardy, meaning we've already been warned by the Department of Education that we're not eligible to receive all of that money that we're supposed to get because of what they did. So there's some hope that maybe they'll realize. There was a comment I was going to say I heard one of them make, because one senator asked about that during the hearing. And the comment was, well, maybe the federal government will change its mind. Well, within 24 hours, we got a letter saying, no, we're not changing our mind. This is what the deal is. And this is very common when there's an emergency or unusual situation and the federal government decides to, give money. They aren't doing it to have states use it for regular expenses. It's to help with these emergency situations. So it's a pretty common thing. It's not unusual, and why they didn't understand it. Wisconsin and Texas have the honor of being the only two states that are not going to qualify for this federal money unless there's a change. The Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau in Wisconsin has estimated that we would need to be given, that this, not Monona Grove, but that the budget would have to include an additional $350 million of state funds in order for us to even qualify for these federal funds, which one legislator termed as an obscene amount of money. So that, it tells you where it's, the politics are nasty. And, as someone said at the Public Education Network meeting, the politics aren't our fault, but that's what we live with. So contacting legislators, I can't say it enough. I mean, Jared, it's rare that Jared gives that much of a soliloquy too, but this is really, really serious. So yeah, whatever people can do is appreciated.
Thank you, Susan. Eric?
Jared or Dan, I guess. I've always been a little bit confused on the May 15th cutoff date for notifying teachers and then the budget date being June 30th. It never has made sense to me. And just so, is there something that I'm missing that it doesn't make sense of why that happens? Oops.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Eric. None of the timelines, they might have made sense at one point, but so many of them are statutory and things have changed over time. If you think back to the pre revenue limit date, prior to 1993, in there where you truly had more local control. Local school boards could set the levy based upon what you saw as your local needs. And then those annual meetings at that point usually were in July, because you would do your budget, you get it approved, and then it made sense with your fiscal year. And but now I think the fact that, first of all, the state legislature is always a bit late, with their budget. And like you said, the contracts, I don't think have ever really aligned with the budget, piece. Now, the other thing that did change there significantly too is with Act 10 and the elimination of most aspects of collective bargaining. That those provisions were always in the collective bargaining agreement about if you had to have a reduction in force and so on. And now, because that's no longer that's prohibited, you have to do it through the contracts. And they never realigned it necessarily. I mean, they did make one change and moved it later to give schools more time, which was a good thing. But it again, with the budget, there's not an alignment. So that's my perspective on it. I don't know, Jared.
Can't DPI change that date? Wouldn't that give us a little bit more flexibility and make it a little bit easier if they change that May 15th date?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's statutory.
It is statutory.
So it needs,
statutory.
so it would have to go through the legislature then,
Right.
Legislative process. Okay. So then it's never getting changed.
Yeah.
And I do think, it definitely hasn't aligned for a number of years. I think the pandemic has definitely increased that for us. Part of that is, us needing to follow, state and local health orders and losing 62 students or FTEs. We're anticipating them coming back. And so we have to staff at that, because we don't also want to have class sizes at 35, and also knowing that as Nicole and the principals work through the hiring, trying to hire potentially a first grade teacher or a science teacher in August, when we know the pools are already pretty thin, we want to be able to hire the best teachers for our students. And that's putting it pretty late in the game. And so that's the other part of it, is we have to plan and issue those contracts. Obviously following the legislature, but as a school district, we could say we're only going to get 30% of those students back, lay off a couple of teachers, but then all of a sudden those students come back, and now we're trying to hire teachers in August. And not saying they're all bad teachers that are remaining in August. It's just definitely late in the game, and we're trying to prepare. And there's a lot of professional development that students and curriculum and instruction are doing over the summer that help support our new teachers that we're hiring. So being able to hire them, in May and early June allows us to incorporate them in. So it's not like a full week of extreme intense training to get them caught up to what we're doing at Monona Grove. We still do intense training, but it also allows it to be spread out over the summer.
Thank you, Jared. And Jared, I just want to say thanks again. Your expertise and knowledge on this subject is insurmountable and valuable. So valuable to our district. I know from other districts how valuable you are. And I'm really happy that I'm confident that you are on top of everything. And it's pretty complex stuff. So I trust your words, Jared, and what you have to say. I just feel bad that we can't, that our hands are kind of held behind our backs and we can't really do a lot about this. So
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Susan Fox and then Elizabeth.
Well, yeah, just briefly, I was going to say the other factor was that we used to be able to count on at least close to an inflationary revenue limit increase, and that stopped in like 2010, 11, and we just have less of an idea. And again, that's out of our control too, because we just don't know from year to year. And then this year, to get none. I mean, that year, I think we lost $600 and some per student, and we've been trying to build back up ever since then. And there are districts in far worse shape than we are. So it's a statewide serious issue. I mean, that goes to the teacher contracts. Remember, we did get an email from a teacher wondering, how do I sign this contract when it's last year's salary? We thought, well, unfortunately, that's all we can offer at this point because we just don't know.
Thank you, Susan. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate around what Susan and Jared said, and I agree with Eric. Jared, your knowledge and your ability to take the information and translate it in a way that is very understandable is really commendable and incredible. So thank you for that. I think, for me and thinking about, the community that may be listening here, we talk about these things in such like big technical terms, right? We talk about, revenue limits and per pupil aid, and the numbers are big, right? We're talking, millions of dollars. But to me, at the end of the day, and this is what is the frustrating part about it, is that the burden that gets more, like who bears the burden, are students. And so what does this translate to, right? It's students that are in classrooms that are larger than we want them to be. It's, staff that, we're not able to pay at a wage that is, good and acceptable, which causes all kinds of, stress and burnout and implicates those pieces, right? It's lack of, opportunities for professional development, professional learning for our teachers so that they can, continue to learn and grow and progress. It's lack of curriculum materials. It's all of these things that at the end of the day is in the service of kids. And so I just really want to get real with the community that's listening that that's what this translates to. So as we're talking about these big sort of abstract concepts and these ideas or whatever else, at the end of the day, it's the student that's in the seat in the classroom who suffers as a result of these things the most.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Moving on to school renovations and construction update.
Okay, just through a few dates, just to remind everyone, we do have our next board tour scheduled next week, Tuesday at 4:00. We will be getting an email out to you with instructions about where to park. As you know, we have there's construction going on along Highway BB and Bus Road, and so we actually will have you be able to enter from Glacial Drumlin. That drive will be open and accessible to go from the Glacial Drumlin parking lot into Granite Ridge. So we'll send an email with a map and showing that information as well. So really excited. By next week, it's going to really look close to finish, so excited to have you that next opportunity. Then July 17th is actually, I believe, a Saturday. I think that's the last day. And Jared, I hope I got the exact right date, but where they essentially turn over the keys to the district. And then those last couple of weeks of July and beginning of August, we will be moving all of our things in, new furniture and all that sort of thing, getting things set up. And so we at this point anticipate our teachers being able to have access by August 11th. and where everything, all their belongings will have been moved for them. And so we're right on schedule, really excited to move into this next phase here and occupy the building. And then on the executive summary that's attached, there is a typo. On the first page, it says April 28th. This is actually May 28th. This was put together. So it's, a week and a half old, but you'll see, again, it's really coming along, as well as the projects at the high school. The turf is in the process of being finalized, is laid down. Just really excited. Every project is right on time and going really well. So.
Suzanne Fox?
A quick request. Now that I'm going to be out of town next week, I won't be able to attend the tour. So between you and Susan, I'm just hoping one of you will let me know if the foundation gets to get a tour. Maybe I can jump into that one. That's all. I'll try to remind you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, moving on to future meeting dates.
Okay, so again, we have the tour on there next week. So I did email the board about a special meeting on the 16th. I didn't get any replies that with a conflict. So that's specifically for the one item to do for the superintendent evaluation. I put 6 o'clock as a tentative time. I guess if we could take an opportunity now and confirm that that's the time that works for everyone, unless you'd like to. Sometimes we have done a little bit earlier meetings, but so I thought I'd leave that, confirm that as well tonight.
Okay, is everyone able to attend? Just kind of a thumbs up.
And I appreciate 6 since I'll be on the West Coast, so it'll be
Okay.
4. And I'd rather have it 4 than 3.
All right, looks like we all are able to attend, Dan.
Okay, great. And then the other one I'd like to bring to your attention, again, confirming on June 24th, we have our next workshop or training with the Dane County Equity Consortium. And so that also is virtual. And you had the link that you could register yourself. If you haven't yet, or if you have any questions about that, please let Joyce or myself know. We'll be glad to help you. But hopefully you can all attend. We're really excited to get back together again with our colleagues, other board members around Dane County. And again, that evening will be facilitated by Percy Brown and Rainey Briggs. So should be a really good evening for us.
Susan Manning?
And could you and Joyce resend that link so that we can make sure that if someone hasn't gotten registered, that reminds them to do that?
Absolutely. We'll do that right away.
Thank you, Susan.
All right. Andrew, your favorite thing to do?
Oh, I'm on, finally. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Susan Fox?
Aye.
Elizabeth Cook?
Aye.
Susan Manning?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
And Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carried. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you.